How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you this morning, Coach?
Fantastic, man. We are in the middle of obviously signing day, which is ultra important. Um, Middle of bowl prep, which is going phenomenal right now. A lot of people have really pulled the rope in many different directions. I'd like to first give a huge congratulations or a shout out to our academic department and personnel, Dr. Karen McComas, Lisa Williamson and her staff, all the tutors and administrators. This was the first year that the report I got, this was the first year since Marshall has been going to the bowls in recent history that we did not have a player come up ineligible for academics. Today was the Marshall University certification day to finalize all grades. So all members on our trip were certified and academically eligible. So a huge shout out to our academic staff, administrators, and everyone involved in that. I think it just shows you combine what we're doing off the field, what we're doing in recruiting. Obviously, the product on the field will reflect those two categories. And I think we're heading in the right direction. I think our process is working. No, it is not a switch. So it's not going to happen overnight. And yes, there are still things we need to improve in our program in all facets, on and off the field. But I try not to forget what our ultimate goal here is to make sure that every player, person in our organization is more successful in life because of being part of our organization. I think when you start making progress academically, that's a huge step. Obviously, all of us, including Paul, at some point, someone gave us a college degree, or we earned it somehow, some way, which ultimately opened a lot of doors for us in our lives. So making some huge strides, really excited about this signing class. There are a couple young men, just so you know, who have some high school ceremonies and some announcement celebrations planned that we'll announce a little bit later today. So out of respect for their process and their moment, we kind of held on, a couple of those guys, announcing them. But we do plan by the end of the day today to be at, by the end of the day tomorrow, to be at a full 29 signees. Right now we have 19 that we are allowed to talk about from a process standpoint. By the end of the day today, we'll be at about 26. There's a couple young men who their schools are having a big celebration on February the 2nd, who we'll hold announcement on them as well. And then there's one young man who is waiting certification at his school before it becomes official. But right now, I'm really excited about the class. I think we addressed some issues, immediate issues. I think we addressed some future issues, and I think we also elevated the talent level on our team. So one of the goals that we wanted to make sure when we started this recruiting class is that obviously we were in a good situation coming in where we had a lot of super seniors who played a lot of football here. We had a lot of success here. So we wanted to make sure that when those guys left, we didn't have huge drop-offs in the areas that those guys were leaving from. And then we also wanted to kind of even out the roster. The roster was a little lopsided at some positions. So we had to make sure that we did some maintenance and managing, so we don't have this problem 2 years down the road where all of a sudden we have gaps in our roster. So I think we did a really good job. Big shout out to Michael Villagrana, who is our general manager, kind of heads up our recruiting. Him and his department did a phenomenal job all year of making sure that our recruiting efforts matched our intensity on the field, making sure that we had a great plan, doing a lot of behind the scenes work when coaches were game planning, already having kids eval'd and prepped and ready to be moved on. So really good day. A lot of positive for Marshall going on right now. I'm just really happy to be a part of it.
Coach, so much goes into signing day. Is this a nerves day for you, or is this kind of a relief day once you start getting those signatures in?
It's a little bit more like shifting gears in a car. You know, you're running your RPMs all the way up until, you know, you get that in, and now we can shift gears. But the car is still moving forward. Because again, you know, as soon as we get these young men signed, cleared, and everything gets checked off, our next focus after this meeting, we got a 1 o'clock team meeting that's starting right now. So after this meeting, I'll actually get on the phone with about 10 to 15 2023 kids in the state of West Virginia to start the recruiting process on them. Obviously, a lot of them we've already identified and had some communication with over the summer, but we focused a lot on the 22s and the transfer portal and evaluating. So now it's time to turn the page. So yeah, we're shifting gears, and you know, this phase of it is over, and you feel comfortable knowing that these young men are going to be a part of the program, but now it's moving forward to the next. So we'll talk to probably, realistically, I'll probably talk to 5 today, 5 tomorrow, and 5, you know, on Friday. But starting on the 23s, because again, relationship building, getting them to know that, you know, our focus in recruiting in-state talent is still there. And also getting them to understand that, you know, you don't have to leave home to be successful in college.
Coach, you probably already maybe answered this question, but I'll ask it a different way. Where do you see the immediate impact of this recruiting class? Is it going to be a gradual process as you get into the next season? Or, I mean, will there be, you know, some kids that really just have that immediate impact for you that you're looking for?
Well, I think anytime, 2 things. One, anytime you get into the transfer portal, you're looking for immediate impact, right? You're probably not going in the transfer portal for a developmental player. Could happen, but this is not our focus. So all the guys that we've got out of the transfer portal, we're looking for immediate impact. Now, does immediate impact mean that they're going to win the Heisman? No, but immediate impact means they should come in and be able to give us a veteran player from an experience, from a physicality, from a, hey, they've had a year or 2 or 3 of physical development in a college program. They've played in a college game. And all those young men will be early enrolling. So that will help us kind of get a full winter, spring, summer, adapting them to our process and how we do things, right? Because it's still going to be a little bit of a transition. So from that perspective, I think the transfer portal is going to help us fill some holes quickly that are going to allow us to kind of keep some things rolling and not have a step back. One of the areas that I think we lost a lot of, or will be losing a lot of experience and depth, is going to be in the secondary. We are blessed right now to be playing with some veteran guys back there. You know, Brandon Drayton, Nazeeh Johnson, Corey McCoy played a lot of football for Marshall University. You know, Corey being just 1 year, but Nas and BD have played a lot of football back there. And with them exhausting their eligibility, you know, having some veteran presence return is going to be huge. Do we have some guys on the team now that have played, you know, a role back there? Yes, but again, we need some depth in the secondary. I think some of the young guys, even that we signed out of high school, which may not give us an immediate impact, but it'll create depth, right? So now you're able to say, hey, you know, where Brandon Drayton played 52 snaps on defense, well, the next guy may not be Brandon Drayton ready. He maybe only play 32. Well, if we can get one of the freshmen to play 12, you know, we've still kind of closed the gap on what we're missing there. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest areas. Defensive line, you know, I know at the beginning of the year, I talked about how I thought our defensive line was probably one of the most disruptive in Drupal 5. Well, a lot of those guys are exhausted eligibility. So having to be able to get some D linemen to come in that have some playing experience at the college level is going to help as well. I don't think you can ask a high school offensive or defensive lineman to come in and truly make an impact. If they do, that's a bonus. But just from a physicality standpoint and the natural maturation of their body, right? A high school kid's not going to walk in and be ready to compete with a 22-year-old O lineman if they're on the D line. But what I do think, if you can get, there can be some skill sets that they're going to be able to use. You know, if they're a speed rusher off the edge, well, you can use them on third down. You can use them to rush the passer. But I think you need some veteran guys to fill those holes that the TJ Johnsons of the world are going to be, creating a void there. Jamari Edwards is moving on. So those are some key guys inside. Rodney Kroom is a guy who's played a lot of football here. So those are some guys that we got to replace right away.
Coach, one of the positions you had in depth was that quarterback you signed as of right now, Peter Zamora and Cole Pennington. Kind of talk about those two signings and what do you think it brings to the offense?
Yeah, I think it's obvious, right? We've got a void behind Grant. Not that Luke is not doing a phenomenal job of managing his role, but we've got to find someone to push Grant. And I know Tom loves Grant. Is going to invite him over for Thanksgiving next year and everything. But at some point, Grant's going to exhaust eligibility, right? And you don't want the person behind him to be a true freshman. And to be honest, quarterbacks at our level are probably one of the hardest positions to truly evaluate or predict, right? So you say, well, why'd you sign 3? Well, really, after Grant, you got Luke and you got Cam who are on scholarship. Well, really, there's no one else in that room on scholarship, so will all 3 of them, turn out to be great players? I don't know. Well, if it takes one of them 2 years to mature into a really great player or 1 year to mature into a really great player, I think we've all known for a while, if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to struggle to move the ball offensively. So the reason for us taking 3 was to make sure that we found 2 who could definitely do the job. Now, if all 3 of them can do it, great. I think that's my job, and I think it's our coach's job to find a way to make those guys tell us to play them. But, Luke's going to exhaust eligibility, moving forward at some point. Grant's going to exhaust eligibility. So you got to have someone, behind those guys who is developing in the program and not thrown into the fire as a true freshman. I think we got lucky, or Marshall got lucky with Grant, right? He was thrown into the fire as a true freshman, and he did some really good things. But that's the outlier, right? I mean, how many times do you see a true freshman jump in and have a bunch of success at quarterback at a program like Marshall that the expectations are high? So we wanted to give those guys some developmental time, to actually mature into who they could really be.
When you look at the quarterback position, especially in today's time with the transfer portal, it's almost a slippery slope in it, because if a guy's really good, he could, if you're at Marshall, a guy's really good, he can move on to another program. If he's not good, then you've got to find the next step. So, I mean, it sort of lends itself to taking more than the usual position, doesn't it?
Yeah, you kind of gotta change your philosophy now with the transfer portal. I mean, the reality of it is, Tom may run Grant out of here. He just may get tired of his questions. I love it, Tom. Sorry. But the reality of it is, right? It could happen to anybody. It's just we live in that world now. You either adapt or die. And let me back up. I don't have any inclination that is, that Grant or anybody else on our team would do that, but who knows? When guys walk in, my philosophy, when a guy walks in and says, "Hey, coach, I'm going in the transfer portal," I say, "Hey, awesome, man. Anything we can do to help you, we're here for you." I don't get into why you should or why you shouldn't. So I think you got to, at all positions, you got to kind of be ready. And then there's going to come a time, right, where Grant's going to have to make a decision on one more year eligibility, or do I, go into, the next level of my career, whatever that may be. And you don't want to be caught where, one, you got to go into transfer and find a starter, or 2, you got to start somebody who's not ready. So you got to kind of not overload, but you got to kind of have more than less, if that makes sense, at that position. It's tough to take a quarterback out of the transfer portal because you're talking about limited years. You're talking about new system. You're talking about you don't really have time to develop them, because if you're taking a quarterback out of the transfer portal, you're probably expecting him to come in and play right away, right? Because you're saying that probably we don't have what we need in our program. So there's a lot that goes into that. It's a high risk, high reward anytime you dabble in the transfer portal, but it is extremely high risk, high reward when you dabble with the quarterback position, unless the quarterback, right? If someone that on our staff, hey, this kid was at such and such school, I coached there, I know him, I know his mentality, I know his, intellect, I know his ability to throw, different. But if you're just watching film and you're just, scouring the portal, well, quarterback, man, that's tough.
you look at, and a lot of people might think the same of the running back position. You got one of the top freshmen in the country at running back in Rasheen. They see 2, 3, 4 running backs being taken, but again, a similar philosophy as far as Rasheen, with the season he's had, and obviously, you look at some of the defections you've got in the running back room. That was an important position for you too.
Yeah, and everything we do has a process. I know you guys just think that I just show up, at games and say go left and pump my fist, but no. If you look at our running back room, right? Okay, so Pop had an injury, over last year, so he's still rehabbing and working back. But with any injury, right? You stub your toe, you don't know if that toe will ever be good again or not. Okay, so there's a question mark. Well, Sheldon Evans has got a decision to make at the end of the year, right? Is he going to, use his super senior year, or is he going to transition on to the next phase of his life? Knowledge McDaniels is no longer in the program. So now you're really down to Ali and Ethan Payne, the Polka Pit. So you're really down to 2 guys. Well, again, running back is one of those positions. It takes time to develop, right? It's not just a thing. I think Rasheen Ali would have been great if we threw him in there as a true freshman, but he wouldn't be the guy he is now if he didn't have a year of development under his belt where he played a handful of snaps here behind Knox, but he practiced every day. So in that, when you look at that, you say, okay, well, we need an older guy to be able to come in and understand, hey, this is college football. This is how I take care of my body. This is how I run, those type of things. But you also need some younger guys, to start developing. So we can say, hey, down the road, we have the next Rasheen Ali or Doug Chapman or whatever it is. To be honest, Rasheen Ali's going to have some decisions to make here in the near future, whether he returns to school or does he move on to the next phase of his life. I think a lot of times this COVID year has thrown some people's perception of, where guys really are in their college maturation. Really, Rasheen next year will be going into his 3rd year. Is that correct? Correct. So Coyer just told me this is the end of Ali's 3rd year. So by moving on purposes, he's done his time in college that allows him to move on. Now, I'm not saying that he will or won't. But again, you got to kind of prepare for some of these things. Obviously he's had a phenomenal year. He's nationally known. He's done some really good things. So again, you got to kind of prepare. If he walks in at the end of next year and says, hey, coach, I'm going to take my talents, to the NFL. I think I've had a really good year. Okay, well, who do you have? So a lot of these positions where it looks like we've taken a lot, we're just preparing, for the opportunity that, something happens and guys make decisions. Now, I think at running back, you can spread the love, right? You can play multiple guys at running back. You probably are good playing 2.5 guys in a real, like if you have a guy like Ali, you're probably playing 2.5 guys. But you're also thinking about special teams, your coverages, your return game. So there's a lot of areas where the skill set as a running back can hit the field.
Coach, looking at some of the guys who have committed to transferring, some of the guys you've announced today, particularly the Florida State guys, Robinson and LeBourne, those guys came into Tallahassee as really high-level recruits. For one reason or another, things don't work out with the guys there. What's the pitch like when you're going after these guys that had been so highly regarded coming out of high school, when you're trying to get them to come to Huntington from their current school?
Yeah, well, all of those guys I recruited personally. I recruited Kalen because I was at Penn State at the time, and Saquon had just kind of hit the charts, and he was the top running back in high school, and he was in the area in the Virginia Beach area where I was recruiting. So I've been to his house for a home visit, and I felt like I lost to Florida State when we didn't get him. Same thing with Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson was on our board at Alabama. It came down to where we were going to take another wideout, or we were going to take a guy at another position, and we took a guy at another position. So I have a very long-standing relationship with both of these guys. That's part of the reason why they came here, because again, when you're in the transfer portal, it's scary, man. You're jumping into something you don't know. And the thing that you got to think about, like, transfer portal is not a multi-year thing. Like, once you jump in there, you're stuck. So like you jump in the transfer portal and you go to a school and you don't like it, well, the rules don't allow you to get in again. So a lot of these guys are looking for some type of comfort, with something that, hey, I know Coach Huff. I know one of the things that Brian Robinson, he's really good friends with Corey Gamage and EJ Jackson, came from the same area. So they have been telling him about, what the new, Marshall was like and what Coach Huff was like. And then he's like, yeah, Coach Huff recruited me at Alabama. So now you got a little bit of a familiarity with not only the people here, but the players. And then same thing with Kalen. Kalen, he's a guy that has been recruited for me at Penn State, really liked the relationships I built. Felt like Florida State was the better fit for him. Didn't have, the success that he thought he would have had, battled through some injuries, probably grew up as much as anyone else in the program, as far as mentality wise. And now he's got an opportunity to come back and finish his career the right way.
Tell me a little
Coach,
bit about Cam Pedro. That's a guy who's obviously got some connections to the school through his father being a very good player at Marshall. Played on a really high level team down in Georgia with some really highly regarded teammates as far as recruiting goes. Just what's Cam Pedro bring to the program?
Cam's a guy that we had camp in the summer. We have camp and everybody's out there running around, and Cam is a guy that caught our eye in camp. And I didn't know at the time that his dad played here. He's just running routes and he's running his 40. And I'm looking at this guy with really good hip flexibility, really smooth in and out of routes, catching the ball well, competing. One of the things I look for at camp is, does a guy keep trying to get to the front of the line, or does he just kind of take a rep and stand in the back? And Cam just kept getting to the front. He'd go to the right side, he'd take a rep. He'd go over to the left side, he'd take a rep. And I went to Coach Trickett. I said, who is, it might have been number 155 or whatever his jersey number was. And he said, oh, that's Cam Pedro. His dad played here, his legacy, ran really well. Cam's a guy that's not big in stature. So he's a guy that's going to come in the development world. He's going to have to put on some weight, put on some strength. But he has played championship football. I think right now, I'm not sure we have any guy on our team, and this is a stat that you can double check. Coyer, help me out here. I don't know if we have any guy on our team that won a state championship in high school right now. I don't know. And that says a lot, because the mentality of winning, it's not just something you can talk about. And that just doesn't mean that these guys didn't have great high school careers. Just talking about winning championships is something that is contagious. There's a different type of expectation when you play. There's a different type of understanding of what it takes to get deep into the season. There's a different type of understanding of what it takes to compete at a high level. Cam and Grubbs are two young men that we signed who won state championships. That means something. Now, is that the end all be all? No. You're a good football player. I can't call plays for you. I don't know what your culture is, but it says something when you have a championship culture players on your team. It means something, so those are some things that stood out about Cam, that I think they're going to play in the national championship coming up, Collins Hill versus some school out west or something. They're doing a really good job. Their coach does a really good job. Cam's a great kid as far as mentality wise, fits Marshall. We went to his school for a visit, and the parents made posters, and every poster when Cam was like 6, 7, 8 years old is him and his dad, and Cam's got a Marshall shirt or a Marshall hat. So Cam got recruited a long time ago. He just didn't know it. So his dad did a really good job of brainwashing him early about Marshall.
Those legacy guys, Cole Pennington being another one. How important is it to have guys within a recruiting class that know what Marshall's all about going into it, so they can spread that knowledge to the guys that are their peers? Do you feel like it's more important coming from players and peers than what it can be coaches at times?
Yeah, and I think that another thing that goes, that's a good point. I think coming from players, coming from guys their own age is always great. Even to the fact of, I think sometimes we get confused when alumni are back. Even we want the alumni back, we need the alumni back, but the players in the locker room, there's a disconnect between Doug Chapman and, one of the players in the locker room. Now, Doug's on staff, so that's different. But if Doug just came back, oh yeah, he played here. Unless it's like Randy Moss or Byron Leftwich, like they know those guys by name because they see them on ESPN. But there's still a disconnect in era. There's a disconnect in age. There's a disconnect in time that our players respect the former players. But it's different when their own peers are talking about what Marshall means to them. It's different when a 16-year-old is talking to a 16-year-old about what Marshall has done in his life. Different than with any alumni. I mean, with any alumni, there's a disconnect, right? And we need to get more alumni back to try to ease that disconnect so guys feel more comfortable, guys have more of a connection. But it's 10 times more important when it's coming from a 16-year-old to a 16-year-old. Or an 18-year-old to an 18-year-old, because they speak the same language, right? Like, I'm sure Rick Metroff does not know what TikTok is. Great alumni, gonna have a great impact on our players and program. But again, it's a different disconnect, and that's not a knock on Rick. He may be on TikTok right now, I don't know. But like, there's a disconnect in time and age that when it's an 18-year-old talking to an 18-year-old, it's just a different type of discussion.
Coach, looking at the list of signatures you have in, when you look at where these guys are from, the one that really jumps out to me, Andrew Morris from Arizona, very highly regarded linebacker out there. But how does Marshall go get a guy from Arizona? That's not something you see a whole lot around here.
Yeah, so here's what happened. So I don't know if you guys remember, in the summer, we went to some satellite camps, right, in areas around Marshall. We went to West Virginia, we went to Cincinnati, we went to NC State, we went to North Carolina. We went down to Florida. I think that's about it. Andrew Morris' grandmother lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. Andrew Morris was visiting grandma and went to the NC State camp. We were at the NC State camp. We saw Andrew Morris work out, saw him run, saw him do everything. I obviously got a chance to talk to him, about Marshall. Said, hey, where are you from? He's like, Arizona. What are you doing in North Carolina? Well, my grandma lives out here, and I have a lot of family that lives in North Carolina. My brother and I are actually going to drive back to Arizona in a couple weeks. So we said, hey, why don't you guys drive up to Marshall on your way? So they drive up to Marshall, do a visit. They love it. They are planning as a family, prior to Marshall even coming into the picture, to move to North Carolina to be closer to the grandmother. So yes, we got a young man from Arizona, but really he's a North Carolina radius guy, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how that happened. And I would say that's Marshall luck, right? It just so happened to be, he's got a grandmother that lives in North Carolina. He was there for the NC State camp. We were at the NC State camp. They're planning to move east anyway. We were able to see him move, see him work out. He was able to drive up to Marshall before he went back west and fell into our lap. No, we're not trying to recruit a ton of Arizona and California and Nevada players. But again, to me, it's about relationships, right? It's about relationship. He has a relationship in Carolina, in Charlotte, which is very close to us, area that we do a good job in recruiting. He just so happened to play his senior year of football in Arizona.
Coach, I know on Monday you talked about the gap is widening with Marshall moving to the Sun Belt. So will you as a coaching staff kind of look at like the Sun Belt rankings, like recruiting wise, to kind of see like where you guys kind of stack up after the whole sign day's done?
Not for this class, for the 23 class. Because to me, when we started recruiting this class, we were recruiting to our model for Conference USA, where we were as far as, who we were losing, what we were trying to replace. But moving forward, we will definitely do that because I think, again, you're not recruiting necessarily to a conference, you're recruiting to a model, right? What are you recruiting to? What do we do offensively? What do we do defensively? What do we do special teams wise? But I think you have to be very aware of the level that you're playing in and the playing people you're playing against. So if you're playing in the SEC, you can't necessarily recruit guys that, can beat Army. Okay, so if we're playing in the Sun Belt, we need to be recruiting guys that can defeat the teams in the Sun Belt. So you have to look at how are the Sun Belt teams built. Obviously, in the group of 5 level, there's probably going to be very little difference between the Sun Belt and Conference USA as far as the way the teams are built. So now it's our job to go get the best players in the country to fit what we do. So the rankings that we will, be looking at for this class will be based on what Conference USA, the model we were in for Conference USA. I think moving forward into the Sun Belt, our model's got to change just a little bit. And when I say our model, well, we're probably not going to recruit as many players out of Arkansas as Arkansas State. But we also have to be aware of who Arkansas State is recruiting. And I'm just using them as an example as a school that's a little further away. ULL, for an example, we have to be aware of who they're recruiting, because if they're able to tap into bigger, faster, stronger football players, and we're not tapping into that or trying to tap into that, I think we're putting ourselves behind.
Last one from me, Coach. Pete Zamora, I believe, was the first kid that committed once you came in, and he was strong with that all the way through and was a real big cheerleader and tried to get a lot of other guys involved. Just tell me about the recruitment of Zamora and how important he was to kind of getting the ball rolling on this class.
Yeah, Peter worked out with a trainer that I had a relationship with. So he was a guy that trained in his academy. Peter was a guy who'd been training in that academy for, I want to say, probably 4 or 5 years. So the trainer that I had a relationship with, I had a very good relationship with Peter, kind of watched him grow and develop. And one of the things that, when we got here, we were looking for, when we looked at our roster, we said, we got to make sure we get some quarterbacks. And Peter was a guy that to me exudes what a quarterback should exude, right? Leadership, positive energy, a guy who's, able to kind of recruit or pull guys together, right? It's no different than you're trying to pull guys together in recruiting, and then you're pulling guys together on the field. Hey guys, let's go. We're gonna get a good drive here. Obviously Peter has continued to develop, probably a mix between, a solid thrower that's athletic. He's not, he's not Michael Vick, as far as moving around, but he can move, and we can do some of the things we do in the quarterback run game with him, throws well enough. And he's a guy, to me, he's a football junkie. That's the one thing you're going to learn about Peter, man. Coach Cramsey went to his house to do a home visit. He's got a whiteboard in his bedroom. He's got plays drawn up on the whiteboard. He texts Coach Cramsey every week. Hey, what's the game plan this week? How are they against the run? How are they against the pass? Coach Cramsey probably sometimes like, hey, Pete, you got 6 months before you get here, man. Why are you asking me? But again, that's what you want, man. You want people that love the game of football. It's something like, you love your job, you love your wife. There's not a day that goes by that you don't think about what you love. And I think that's what a lot of these guys, especially Peter, that are in this class really have. Anything else? Hey,
I'm
Keith,
good.
you just getting
I'm
off
good here.
Bourbon Street? You good?
Good.
He must have missed that curfew, Coach. Goodness.
Yeah, he did, man. Him and the squirrel, man, the two most undisciplined players on the team, man. It's just, they don't get it. I mean, and you keep telling them, they just don't get it. But, it's my job to continue to remind them. So we'll keep working with them. We're going to need everybody's help. It's like you guys are going to have to watch Keith. I mean, he's obviously, a poor decision maker. So we all have to pull together and help the guy out.
Hey, Coach, I'm somewhere between Chattanooga and Birmingham, so I'm a little bit out of the loop.
Oh, so you went down on Bourbon Street on the dark side of Bourbon Street and got pulled into something that you have no clue where you're at now. Okay, we got it.
Last night I was on 15th Street, and now I'm in between Chattanooga and Birmingham, so I'm coming your way.
All right, buddy. Well, drive safe, man. Again, I know you guys do kind of double duty, recruiting and reporting. This has been, a heck of a recruiting cycle for us. We enjoyed it. We're excited about every single one of these guys. Obviously, we're excited about being here doing this satellite wise. This is our makeshift staff room, if you guys can see behind us. Makeshift staff room, but we are making the best out of it. The bowl has been great. The the attention, the detail that the bowl here has put on has been phenomenal. And obviously capping this class off and being able to kind of shift gears into the next class is going to be a great opportunity for us to continue to build here. So thank you guys. Look forward to seeing all you guys Saturday.
Thanks, Coach. See you.
Thank you, Coach.